Anthropic had already established itself as a key player in military AI. Before any of this controversy erupted, the company held contracts worth up to $200 million with the Pentagon, and Claude had been deployed across classified networks for intelligence analysis and cyber operations. They were actually the first AI lab to put their models on the Department of Defense's classified network. That is not a small thing. It means Anthropic was already deep in the system, already helping the military process sensitive information and plan operations. But then the negotiations hit a wall. Anthropic wanted something that seems reasonable on its face. They wanted written assurances that their models would not be used for fully autonomous weapon systems or for mass surveillance of American citizens. The Pentagon's response was to demand that Anthropic agree to let the military use their models across all lawful use cases. That phrase, all lawful use cases, is where everything fell apart. It creates an irreconcilable conflict, because what the military considers lawful and what protects civil liberties are not always the same thing. The Pentagon reportedly called Anthropic's concerns philosophical, and woke. Defense officials were apparently irate that a technology company thought it should have any say over military operations. From their perspective, the military should decide how to use the tools, not the people who build them. That mindset reveals exactly what they want from artificial intelligence. They want systems that can enhance surveillance capabilities, that can accelerate targeting decisions, that can help manage populations both domestically and abroad. They want AI that serves the war machine without question. This is why refusing to collaborate matters. Anthropic was willing to lose billions in contracts rather than hand over their technology without limits. That kind of stance is rare in an industry where most companies chase government money regardless of consequences. When OpenAI stepped in and signed their own deal, they made clear what values they prioritize. Altman's agreement includes the same prohibitions on paper, but the context tells a different story. The Pentagon got what they wanted from a company willing to play ball. Anthropic got blacklisted for having boundaries. The lesson is straightforward: who you do business with reveals who you are. Sam Altman's announcement came late on a Friday night. He said his company had reached an agreement with the Department of War to deploy AI models across their classified networks. The statement sounded reassuring. He talked about safety principles and red lines that would never be crossed. But the timing tells a different story. This deal came just hours after Anthropic was blacklisted by the same department for refusing to drop those exact same protections. Let us be clear about what these safety restrictions actually meant. Both companies originally wanted prohibitions on domestic mass surveillance. They wanted guarantees that humans would remain responsible for any use of lethal force, including autonomous weapons systems that could select and engage targets without human intervention. Anthropic argued that existing laws simply have not caught up with what AI can do. The technology can supercharge the collection of publicly available data, taking information from social media posts and combining it with geolocation data to create surveillance capabilities that never existed before. What is legally collected can become something far more invasive when processed by these models. The Pentagon did not see these concerns, as legitimate. Defense officials described them as philosophical impositions, even calling them woke obstacles to military operations. They wanted full access to use AI across all lawful use cases without restrictions. When Anthropic refused to back down, the government responded with extraordinary force. The company was labeled a supply chain risk to national security. a designation typically reserved for foreign adversaries. This is where the boycott of OpenAI becomes not just reasonable but necessary. Altman claimed the Department of War agreed to his safety principles. But if those principles were truly non-negotiable, why did Anthropic get punished for holding the same position? The difference is that OpenAI chose accommodation, while Anthropic chose confrontation. When a company collaborates with military institutions that reject basic safeguards against mass surveillance and autonomous weapons, they become complicit in whatever follows. The technology they provide will be used for population monitoring, for targeting systems, for capabilities. We cannot fully predict a boycott. Sends a message that some lines should never be crossed, no matter how politely the agreement is worded. The political retaliation came swiftly and with remarkable force. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth took the extraordinary step of designating Anthropic a supply chain risk to national security. This is a label the government typically reserves for foreign adversaries, companies tied to hostile nations, not American tech firms founded and operated on US soil. The message was unmistakable. Anthropic was being treated as a threat to the country simply for refusing to hand over its technology without safeguards. President Trump then took to Truth Social with a characteristic broadside. He called Anthropic left-wing nut jobs and a radical left woke company. He declared that we will decide the fate of our country, not some out-of-control, radical left AI company. The rhetorical flourishes were familiar, but the implications were grave. Every federal agency was directed to immediately cease using Anthropic's technology. Contractors working with the government were forced to certify they were not using Anthropic models. This was not merely a contract dispute, it was a political purge. What Anthropic had refused remains central to understanding this moment. The Department of War wanted AI systems that could be deployed without restrictions for mass surveillance and autonomous weapons. They wanted the ability to monitor populations at scale, to process vast troves of social media data and geolocation information, and to develop weapons systems that could select and engage targets without meaningful human oversight. Anthropic drew a line. They said no to domestic mass surveillance. They insisted that humans must remain responsible for decisions about the use of force. This is precisely why OpenAI deserves scrutiny and resistance. Sam Altman's company agreed to deploy its models on classified military networks after what he described as a deep respect for safety from the Department of War. But the same department had just blacklisted Anthropic for proposing nearly identical safety restrictions. The difference was not in the principles, it was in the willingness to comply, to hand over powerful technology to an institution openly seeking to use it for surveillance and warfare without meaningful constraints. Boycotting OpenAI is not just reasonable, it is a moral necessity for anyone who believes AI should not become a tool of unchecked state power. The specifics of what OpenAI agreed to reveal a great deal about where this is all heading. Altman committed to building technical safeguards that keep the models confined to cloud networks rather than edge environments. Edge environments means the AI runs directly on hardware in the field, on drones, on autonomous vehicles, on weapons systems themselves. The distinction matters. Cloud deployment creates a natural bottleneck, a point where human oversight can theoretically intervene, but it also creates a dependency. The military needs OpenAI's engineers to maintain that infrastructure, which is why the company will deploy what they call forward-deployed engineers directly into classified environments to monitor safety in real time. What does the Department of War actually want with these systems? The Answer stretches far beyond battlefield applications. Military AI inevitably bleeds into domestic surveillance capabilities. The same systems designed to identify targets overseas can identify patterns of behavior at home: social media monitoring, geolocation tracking, predictive policing. All of it becomes exponentially more powerful when you have advanced language models sorting through the noise. This is not speculation. The Pentagon has spent decades building surveillance infrastructure. AI supercharges that infrastructure, and this brings us to why refusing to work with military applications matters. Anthropic drew a line. They said no to certain uses, and the government crushed them for it. OpenAI said yes, wrapped in careful language about principles and safeguards, and they were rewarded with exclusive access. The message is unmistakable: cooperate or face destruction. Boycotting OpenAI is not just about one company or one contract, it is about refusing to normalize the integration of civilian AI companies into the military-industrial complex. Every person who uses ChatGPT, every business that builds on OpenAI's API, becomes a small part of that revenue stream. The choice to walk away is a choice about what kind of future you want these companies to build toward. So why did OpenAI walk away with a deal while Anthropic got blacklisted? The answer lies in how each company approached the negotiating table. A source familiar with OpenAI's agreement explained that the restrictions Altman accepted simply reflect existing United States law and Pentagon policy. They are not new legal standards. In other words, OpenAI agreed to terms that were already on the books. Terms the military was already bound by anyway. Altman's statement acknowledged that mass surveillance is already illegal, and that the Pentagon will comply with applicable law. This was a clever move. It allowed OpenAI to claim the moral high ground, while giving the Pentagon nothing new to worry about. The company positioned itself as a cooperative partner, someone the military could work with. Anthropic took a different approach. Dario Amodei and his team wanted assurances that went beyond existing legal frameworks. They worried that artificial intelligence could supercharge surveillance capabilities, taking legally collected data and turning it into something far more powerful and dangerous. A senior Pentagon official put it bluntly. The problem with Dario, the official said, is that with him it is ideological. We know who we are dealing with. That comment reveals a lot about how the Pentagon views these negotiations. They saw Anthropic as trying to impose conditions, as trying to tell the military what it could and could not do. OpenAI, by contrast, came across as a team player. This distinction matters enormously. The Department of War wants artificial intelligence for population control and battlefield dominance. They want systems that can process vast amounts of data, identify threats, and guide decision-making at every level. When a company like Anthropic pushes back, when they draw lines in the sand, the military sees that as interference. When OpenAI nods along and agrees to existing law, they see a partner. This is why boycotting OpenAI makes sense. The company has chosen to work with an institution that is actively developing AI for warfare and domestic control. They have made a calculated decision to prioritize access and profit over the ethical concerns that their own safety principles supposedly represent. Anthropic may not be perfect, but they refused to bend. OpenAI showed exactly who they are when the stakes were real. Anthropic made its position clear. The company announced it would sue the Pentagon over the supply chain risk designation, saying it was deeply saddened by the decision. This was not a fight they wanted, but they were not willing to accept being blacklisted for insisting on basic safety principles. The lawsuit marks an extraordinary moment in the relationship between technology companies and the government. What happened next was unexpected. Employees at both OpenAI and Google began calling on their own executives to stand in solidarity with Anthropic. These were not public protests or walkouts, but internal pressure campaigns, asking leadership to support a competitor that had taken a stand. The employees understood something their executives may have missed. If the government can blacklist one company for raising safety concerns, no company is truly safe from political retaliation. This raises fundamental questions about who should control artificial intelligence in a democracy. Should AI companies have any say over how the military uses their technology? The Pentagon's position is clear. They believe military decisions belong to military and civilian leadership, not technology companies, but Anthropic's position is that the law has not caught up with artificial intelligence. They worry that AI can supercharge legal data collection in ways that existing laws never anticipated. Social media posts, geolocation data, publicly available information. All of this can be processed at a scale and speed that transforms legal surveillance into something far more invasive. The precedent here matters enormously. If the government can designate a company as a national security risk simply because it refuses to drop its safety principles, other companies will take note. They will become more compliant, more willing to accept military contracts without asking difficult questions. The clash between safety principles and national security priorities will shape every future AI military partnership. What Anthropic is fighting for, in court, is the right of technology companies to say no when they believe their work could cause harm. Whether the courts agree with them will determine how much influence AI developers retain over their own creations.